Oh man, I can't believe it's here already. It's draft season for us. Season 2, episode 10 of the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast presented by Underdog Fantasy. It was quite a while ago where we first kicked off this event last year, doing it probably the wrong way. But we're doing it the right way.
The famous rookie count up, the world famous.
Right, exactly. Or infamous, maybe. But this is the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast consensus rookie countdown. We have grown. We have 6 people in our network, and we have compiled a riveting list that all of us wanted to change before going into this with new information. So we're not going to do that, though. We're going to stick to the original ranks, and we're going to keep it moving. I, of course, am your host with the most time on his hands. I am Thomas Tipple FF. And fun facts for today: the first ever episode uploaded to the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast was the Full Tilt DFS for Beginners on September 12th of 2020, and the first rookie show that we ever did was April 3rd of 2021.
All right. I'm Billy. You can find me on Twitter at BigBillyFF. I spent way too much time today trying to create a meme of Jakob as Will Smith and me as Chris Rock.
My name is Jakob Sanderson. You can find me on Twitter at FF_RTGB. And 100% of wide receivers drafted from Kentucky since 1989, before pick 89, have had a wide receiver 1 fantasy season.
Oh, wow. I think we already
I like that one.
Kind of tell where Jacob's going to want to go early on in this
Look,
year.
sometimes I tried to look up a fun stat that I could say in bad faith to support Wandel Robinson, and I was just, God gave me it. Lynn Bowden was drafted at at pick 89. The last Kentucky wide receiver drafted highly that failed was drafted in 1989. So 88 and under, we only have Randall Cobb, so we're good to go.
That is a beautiful stat. That is a very, very well done stat.
I feel like Wandale is going to take up a large portion of this program today. Normally,
it depends on how staunchly Billy protests. I can filibuster all day. I'm like Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Look,
Tom's gonna log off.
I'm just gonna leave and come back. I'll leave HR Patrick, who's found his way back to the program here to handle the hosting of you guys going at it. Should have been a people VRTDB on this one, I think.
He'll be back next week.
normally we would kick off the show with a news bit, like a do we care, but the news for once is pretty chill. It's almost like the football world sensed that we were gonna do the rookie show. So nothing new. Harbaugh signed a new 3-year contract, so that may not mean nothing to you guys, but that's something for me, damn it.
There you go.
DK Metcalf is going to the CFL.
Okay, hot breaking news.
Please come to the Bombers, buddy.
He's going to have 3,000 yards.
He's going to play quarterback, running back, and receiver for the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League. Hot breaking. Traded for a poutine and a Molson Canadian. No, in all seriousness,
Alouettes, man. They're trading a Molson and a poutine. He's going to be an Alouette for sure.
Look, like I said, lots of stuff with the rookie show today. I just want to remind everybody, right? The consensus top 3 running backs, if you comment on any piece of content that any of us put out, we are going to screenshot it. You guess the top 3 running backs in this draft class. You guess them in the right order, right? Comment. Well, you're going to take a screenshot of it. We're going to draw names for a Saquon Barkley signed jersey giveaway. See, guys, I'm getting it out of the way early today, so I don't wait till the end where no one's listening. And then also, second way to get in on that, we've expanded a little bit for some people. Look, if you take a picture of you being subscribed and leaving a review on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you listen to the show, and you DM it to any one of the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast members, you will also be entered into the Saquon Barkley signed jersey giveaway. It doesn't matter where you live, Canada, the US, Australia, the UK, don't matter. We're going to pay for it and get it shipped out to you. And you don't got to worry about that. So do that. Get in on the draw. Guys, are you guys ready to go? I'm pumped up. I'm fired up.
I'm unbelievably excited. I was sitting here today pulling up statistics. I'm like, God, I miss doing this.
When you're a kid and it's December 22nd, and the next day is Christmas break, and you're just sitting there in phys ed and you're like, man, like Christmas break, so I can't focus on this shit right now. Man, I was at work. I'm like drafting letters to clients and I'm typing and it's like David Bell's market share. Wait. I'm pumped.
Not now. I love hearing that. And I know I've gotten a lot of DMs about this here part of the show. So we're going to take a quick second. What I actually have is I have clips from the first, or I should say one of the first rookie shows that we ever did, and you will get kind of a blast from the past look at how this show used to look to how it looks now. So sit tight, enjoy the transformation. When we come back, we're going to start with our number 20 pick of the Consensus Full Tilt Dynasty.
Hit it with the glow
podcast.
up.
Let's go.
First time hearing that.
I don't know. Hey, we hired our first employee. I'll give you one guess on who that is.
No idea.
That would be our man, Tom Lee.
Oh, I think Billy's muted.
Billy, you're muted.
It's this thing on my headphones. I keep hitting it. It's driving me nuts. I keep accidentally unmuting myself. But yeah, funny. Hell yeah, Tom Lee.
Look, that is a long time ago.
Absolute babies.
That is a long time ago.
You got
Jacob's hair has
changed a lot.
Yeah, Lucas coming in here all the way from Twitch, where you can go and comment. I had to go and do that. I was thinking maybe we wouldn't do that, like just because maybe it would be like a little bit embarrassing. But we're like, nah. I think we had to get it done. Look, I'm going to simplify the screen for everyone so it's a little less distracting in the background. No fancy graphics or gimmicks on this one. It's just straight up countdown. Guys, before we click on number 20 and I hit play in this video,
who do you think it is? I can't tell.
Given what 80% of our screen is, I wonder who it is.
Yeah.
So I think I've given this away on Twitter for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, you couldn't keep the cat in the bag. Oh yeah. I forgot about Jacob's wood background. Every time he's back home, when Jacob's back home because the wall's not white, it's a wood cabin.
Like I'm podcasting from inside of Count Dooku's tree.
That was before I started potting in front of my poorly made bed.
That's right. Guys, I want to give everyone just a couple of seconds maybe on your favorite player left off of this list. I'm going to start like a good honorable mention, if you would. Billy, go ahead, kick it. Who's your honorable mention before we hit this video right here?
Yeah, I was really sad that this guy didn't make the list. Between me and Tom Lee, we really gave it a noble effort. It's Zamir White out of Georgia. Both the Georgia running backs, I think, this year have a legitimate shot of being very good for fantasy if they land in the right position with a team that's going to use them correctly. I prefer Zamir White over Cook. That's just me personally. But besides that, I think Zamir White.
I'm fucking Switzerland on this one. Like, you guys both have these strong takes on these Georgia running backs. So I don't know. Both seem kind of bad.
I'm rather neutral. It's just I view these running backs as a little higher up the list than a lot of other people do. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I'm just taking my higher one. Like, if we were just doing my ranks, we'd be talking about Zamir White today. And I don't know as though that's the case for anyone else besides Tom Lee, who is very bullish. But besides that, I think Zamir White has a legitimate opportunity to be a good player. He has good size speed. That's all great. That's all I really want to talk about him. If he lands in the right place, I think he's going to be a value in drafts.
He's a round 5 pick to the Packers. Jacob?
Oh.
Yeah, man. Mine is a guy by the name of Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir, I was a little bit saddened to learn that I was the only one of the 6 of us to put Khalil Shakir in my top 25. I think this is a guy who I honestly do think will be the best value in rookie drafts this year. And I hope that the third time is the charm, because we've now had basically 3 straight years where a guy who scored really well for me analytically ends up with day 2 draft capital, and then just like this terrible situation, either on a bad team or bad quarterback or both, behind a bunch of guys, and they become like very cheap in rookie drafts. I just think, wow, just what a locked in value. I'd make this bet again tomorrow. And that was, of course, KJ Hamler 2 years ago and Delami Brown last year. And so I'm sorry to report that Khalil Shakir has no chance in the NFL whatsoever based on that track record. However, Khalil Shakir out of Boise State, wide receiver, actually has pretty decent size, 6 feet, 190. He ran in the low 4.4s at the combine. I don't care about that, but the NFL does. And so I think he's going to have pretty nice draft capital. If you look at grinding the mocks right now, his draft capital is sitting in the mid 80s. So seems decently safe, a decently good bet for the third round. And if so, he's a really productive guy. A guy that I'm sure we will be talking about, not today because he's much higher up our ranks, is Sky Moore. After that, if I look at the rest of these group of 5 wide receivers, Tolbert, Dobbs, someone that we'll talk about a little bit later from the FCS today. I just think that Shakir is better than these guys. He produces better than them. He broke out earlier as 3 years of over threshold production. I wish he was an early declare. He's not. But to me, beyond that, he looks pretty similar to Sky Moore. And I just think in terms of like a safe bet at wide receiver, probably the latest guy you can get in your drafts that might have decent capital and actually is really productive and has decent size and athleticism, I think it's Shakir. So that's my favorite guy that we're not talking about today.
If I did one more step, like one more pick, it would have been completely Shakir.
I'll take it.
Yeah, he wasn't even somebody that was even remotely on my radar until I saw Twitter kind of go to war with him for him. So I appreciate him. And for me, someone's got to pick a tight end here. Unfortunately, one did not make our top 20.
Not my fault, man.
We tried. We tried.
Like, egregiously high.
You and me
really
tried.
Put in work.
We tried.
I don't know how that math worked out.
With the rise of tight end premium, right? Trey McBride did not make our list, and he's obviously going to be the top tight end drafted in this draft. Although that the guy from Virginia is looking, Cody Carpentier posted a screenshot. It's the one screenshotting him per sources with the round 1 pick at 29 for him. Unbelievable. But I think Trey McBride's going to be the guy in this draft class for tight ends. Tight ends are kind of a big deal. You either are Tom Lee and would rather not draft one and start one off waiver wire, or you're like me and you're going to take one early every time. So I think
another one slightly later.
Yeah, exactly. And then so I like McBride. I think he's going to be a complete package. I think he's got a lot more Freiermuth than not. And I think Freiermuth was really helped out by another podcast that really helped boost his fantasy stock and perception. So shout out for them. Hopefully they can do the same thing for McBride. But I like him as a player. And I think in tight end premium leagues, especially taking him with an early 2 is more than reasonable. I think his draft capital is going to be fine as well. I think teams value that tight end spot. Drew Sample went in the fucking second round. So that shows you how much they like that. Last thoughts before we kick off?
Yeah, I was going to say, how Billy just said, he was like, I don't know how the math worked out. We should let everybody know how the math worked out. So,
that's probably a good idea.
Yeah. So the process is there's 6 of us, the 3 that you see, plus Lucas Gilbert, Maddie B, and of course the co-host of the Fantasy Walkabout, Tom Lee. We each all did our rankings. All of them were equally weighted, and we ranked from 1 to 25. So it gave it a little bit longer than what ultimately makes the 20-1 countdown. And then I scored it in reverse. So if you got ranked number 1, you get 25 points. Number 2, 24, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the way down to 1 point for number 25. And then to sort of help tilt it towards people who were liked at least enough by us for consensus, anyone who fell off the boards entirely got a -3. So that's how someone like a McBride falls off this list. Is he was my number 16 overall, actually. He was Tom's 19, but the other 4 didn't have him on the list at all. So it ends up all
crazy to me.
No, just me and Tom Lee didn't have him on. Lucas and Maddie both had him ranked.
Oh, did they?
And inside their top 20 as well.
Well, either way, that's the math. And Jacob, one thing I need you to do for the people who are listening via pod and not watching, which our rookie shows are best consumed on the tube of you. So you're going to want to go back and watch that. But if you are just listening, can you explain the graphs that are going to pop up just when they come up, or if you want to do it beforehand, just explain what we're going to be looking at for the graphs that we got from C2C.com. So I'm going to hit play on this, and let's talk a little bit of Wario Robinson at number 20 from Kentucky. I'm just going to hit play here. And we're off, guys. Wandel, for the people, Wandel played in Kentucky in 2021 after coming from Nebraska at age 21. He played in 13 games, had 104 receptions, 144 targets, which is amazing. 1,334 yards. He had a 39.3% target share, 72% catch rate, 7 receiving touchdowns, and 0 special teams yards. So
and a partridge in a pear tree.
And a partridge in a freaking pear tree. Jacob, you were almost devastated that Wandel didn't make this list, but you snuck him in at the end after a little adjustment by Lucas, or the Cute Hurts over on Twitch, which you should go and sub to him. He is a fantastic Twitch streamer. He also does our highlight clips that you see all over YouTube. Guys, Wandel, I know you two have strong opinions, so actually maybe I'll give mine. When Marquise Brown was drafted, he was drafted at 5'9", 166 pounds. I believe he is listed now at 5'9", 183, 181. So obviously weight gain is possible. But Marquise Brown was an incredible athlete. Rondale Moore, 5'7". Sure, he's small. Incredible athlete. Wandale did not put up incredible athlete numbers and testing. I am the most concerned outside of Billy, I think, with him from this group for sure. I think he can be good. I think he's going to probably be more of a gadget player, like I think Jacob's going to mention in Lynn Bowden. So, guys, Wandale, Jacob, I want to start with you because he's kind of your love child here.
Yeah, so it makes me a little sad, unfortunately, that we're talking about him all the way down at 20, but I fully understand it. Look, this is kind of a caveat with a lot of the guys we talk about on today's show, which is that we can't be quite sure about the draft capital piece yet, right? Like I mentioned that with Shakir, we're going to mention that with Wandale. I think there's at least 3 other guys we're going to talk about today, where the draft capital is a very large question mark.
Yeah.
And it is with Wandale Robinson too. So I should note right now, since his combine measure in, where he came in at 5'8", he was reported at like 5'11", which was always, totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was hoping for 5'9", 5'10", but he comes in at 5'8", and he's fallen down the boards a little bit. But as of now, he is still projected to be a round 3 pick. And so I'm working under the assumption with this ranking that he ends up as a round 3 pick. I think that puts him in a pretty solid spot. We're going to see some graphs pop up as I talk. And those are the graphs of his production metrics. And I have some that compare him to other wide receivers in this class. I have some, and you'll see these for all the wide receivers except for the one that does not play in FBS. And it's going to compare him to the wide receivers in this class. You'll see him compared to some like high ceiling comps of players from similar situations with similar production, with somewhat similar measurables. And that's essentially, we're looking at his yards per team pass attempt, his receiving yards market share, so the percentage of his team's receiving yards, and his weighted dominator rating, which is a combination of his percentage of yards and his percentage of touchdowns on his team. And basically, if you know nothing else about him and you solely look at the stats, he profiles as really as good as any wide receiver in this entire class. He played a pretty gadgety role at Nebraska in his first 2 years, where he played kind of a hybrid of some running back looks, some like jet sweep motion looks, and some wide receiver looks, and he still put up over threshold production. He goes to Kentucky, where they use him more as a traditional wide receiver, and he just absolutely obliterated through the SEC. I mean, he really doesn't look that different from a raw production standpoint than an Elijah Moore looks last year, in terms of a guy who is the only guy in his final junior year, young player in the SEC, just obliterating his way against really, really superior competition. Is pretty much the only target on a team that was actually fairly competitive over at Kentucky. The issues with Wandale, I guess, are size. And like Tom mentioned, the athleticism was sufficient. He ran a 4.4, 4.40, but it certainly doesn't blow the pants off anybody at that miniature size. To me, it really just comes down to production, and it comes down to where I see the NFL going. The idea that the alpha wide receiver looks like a Drake London or a Mike Williams or a Mike Evans is not necessarily the way that things go in today's NFL. We see these players who are shifty, who can work both out of the flanker position and out of the slot, continually getting drafted higher and being more successful in the NFL. We see this with guys like a Deontay Johnson, with guys like an Elijah Moore. And I think with Wandale Robinson, he's a guy who's really shifty, even if he doesn't necessarily have the breakaway speed. I'm just not so sure that he's going to be a guy who's used as a deep threat anyways. So I'm not as concerned about his breakaway speed. I think he knows how to get open. I think he knows how to pick up yards after the catch. And everything that says about his production, which says to me, if he gets drafted on day 2, I think he's going to be a really productive receiver in the National Football League.
I don't know why there was Amari Cooper footage at,
that was
at the
really
end of
weird.
that video,
Yeah.
but apparently my work from my article at goingfor2.com kind of snuck in there.
Hey, if
my bad,
Wandel
that'll
looked like
happen.
Amari Cooper, hell yeah.
Well, at his size, he's probably going to be as injured and as disappointing as Amari Cooper has been. So
I would
that.
happily sign up for Amari Cooper's career in the late second round of my rookie drafts. That sounds like a fantastic value.
Billy, actually, that before Billy goes, Jacob, what's the draft capital that kills him for you completely?
Yeah,
Like,
so
where
pretty
is
much
it?
for
Is it
anybody,
like fifth
if he goes-
round?
As it is for anybody, like if they go day 3, like my base assumption is just that he's not good. Now I'll probably still end up drafting some of him if he goes day 3 because he'll be like dirt cheap. So
Right.
I'll take him like in the late 3rd round, 4th round. Why not? But in terms of like a guy where I'm actually working under the assumption that I think he's going to be productive, and it's really round 3 where it's the cutoff. Like
Okay.
to me, like if he's a round 2 pick somehow, which I think that's unlikely, but I mean, hey, we just saw Dwayne Eskridge and Tutu Atwell drafted in round 2, so anything's possible. If he's like a round 2 pick, I think he has like really good chance of being a wide receiver 2 in the NFL. If he goes round 3, I think it's probably closer to 50-50. And that's a guy that I'd be targeting in the mid to late 2nd round for sure. If it's round 3, then I'm not going to keep my hopes up, but you'll never know. It's really, I'm hoping that we're there on the Friday night of the draft on day 2. And I hear Wandel Robinson.
I find it interesting that he's currently on Keep Trade Cut ranked above Brian Edwards. So there's that. Suck it, Brian
He
Edwards.
certainly should be. I
you
mean,
suck, buddy. You're terrible. Also, I just want to shout out Andrew Jameson, watching the boys and doing my first MLB draft, and I wasn't invited to an MLB draft, and that's really going to put a damper on our friendship moving forward. I just think you should know that. Billy, your thoughts on Wandale before we move to 19, or you guys start a fight, which we'll see which one happens first.
Look, I never like to be the anti guy on anyone, except for Jack Cohn, who I have created a little bit of a rivalry with for absolutely no reason. He has no idea who I am. But talking about Wandale Robinson, it's kind of become this like running rivalry between me and Jacob. But just to talk about the player, a lot of what is getting hyped about him is his target share, his efficiency. A couple things to talk about in terms of his target share, how much of his team's production came from him. Wandale Robinson in 2021 was the wide receiver 1. The wide receiver 2 for that team was Josh Ali. Josh Ali, when he was the wide receiver 1 in 2020, had 470 yards. In 2021, he had 600 behind Wandale Robinson's very, very nice 1,334 yards. That's great.
This is really throwing me off.
All love for the Amari Cooper. All love for Wandale Robinson. He put up a great season. He absolutely deserves that. But let's assume that target share is absolutely not a indicator of his is absolutely not an indicator of the rest of the team's talent. Let's assume that Josh Ali is a perfectly fine player and Wandale Robinson completely beat him out. I'm going to list off a bunch of players here. These players are all players with a greater than 30% college target share that are less than 70 inches tall. Andy Isabella, that's number 1. He had the best college target share. Wandale Robinson. Then we go
UMass.
Yeah. Then we go Elijah Moore, which is exciting. Then we go Jeremy Gallin, Olamide Zaccheaus. Boy, I'm starting off bad on those two. Dwayne Eskridge, Jamison Crowder, Trent Taylor, Jalen Darden, Greg Dortch, Rondale Moore, Tutu Atwell, Poppy White, Kevin Lucas, T.Y. Hilton, Josh Ursula, Richie James, and Scott Miller. So there's some hits in there. There's absolutely some hits in there. My biggest problem is when we look at players who objectively tested worse than Wandale Robinson. Because, spoiler alert, he tested the 5th worst out of all those players I just listed. Out of those players, the people who tested worse than him were Trent Taylor, Greg Dortch, Tutu Atwell, Kevin Lucas. Trent Taylor had 430 yards in his best year in the league. Everyone else on that list combined for 54 yards. The average draft capital of all those players I just listed off is in the late 4th round. And in the middle of the 5th, if we account for all the UDFAs that were on that list, we don't have to. UDFAs are UDFAs, but absolutely besides the point. A lot of the players that are hits in that list are significantly better athletes, players that tested significantly better than him. Andy Isabella, Elijah Moore, Wayne Eskridge, Rondale Moore, Poppy White, who I had to look this guy up because he kept showing up on this list. T.Y. Hilton and Richie James were all testing much better than him. They, at the best, the top of that tier, tested in the late 3rd round on average for draft picks. That's what we're looking at here. I'm all for Wandel Robinson. I think he has the potential to be the outlier here. The problem is he has to be a much larger outlier than a lot of the players I expect to talk about today, because he has to supersede not just his height, not just a subpar athleticism, but also we're going on this efficiency standpoint when his best wide receiver was a guy no one had ever talked about until today. So I'm all for Wandel Robinson being this late round flyer. I think he has as good a chance as anyone in that late 2nd round, early 3rd round to be a decent draft pick in your fantasy drafts. I just would rather use that pick elsewhere for people above him. So Jacob, I know you're heated. I know you were typing into your keyboard that entire time. So go ahead, then we can move on to the next guy.
Right. So okay, I want to. There's 2 things that I think are
Before you go, I do want to waive this right now. I waive my right to rebut whatever he's about to say, because I think Jacob 100% deserves the final word on Wandale Robinson. I allow you to.
My final word on this player. I'm burning it early. Look, I mean, the one thing that Billy said that I 100% agree with is that the draft capital is a massive component. If Wandale Robinson is drafted on day 3, I do not think you should take him in the 2nd round of your rookie drafts. I just don't think you should take any wide receiver that's drafted on day 3 in the 2nd round of your rookie drafts outside of very exceptional circumstances. So to that extent, I totally agree. And yeah, a lot of the combine stuff, I care about it because it affects his draft capital. I don't really care about it in an innate sense, right? You brought up Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder, he was actually drafted in round 4, but Crowder's 5'8". Yeah. He's 185. He ran a 4.56, over a full 1/10 of a second slower than Wandale Robinson did. He's turned into a really nice player. I think too, I mean, you look at that list, a bunch of these guys are just UDFAs that we should throw in the garbage, right? Wandale right now is mocked to be round 3. Again, that might not happen. We don't know. There's a wide range of outcomes on that. It could end up round 4, round 5. That's possible. Maybe he ends up round 2. But also, the prospects that you mentioned, there's only 2 of them that are good and they hit. T.Y. Hilton, not quite as good. He would probably be in the same bucket as someone like a Khalil Shakir that I mentioned earlier, who was a 4-year player at a group of 5 school, had the really good production profile. I actually have him as one of my comps for Wandale in terms of his production profile and his size. And then Elijah Moore, who's just a phenomenal prospect and produced really similarly to Wandale as a guy in the SEC at a short height, more athletic, certainly, but also had that same massive junior year production at Ole Miss, which is a program, of course, in the SEC, with what Wandale did. I mean, some of these guys, right? Andy Isabella, I mean, sure, at UMass, right? That's just a very different situation. And you mentioned the rest of the production on his team. I mean, one guy we're not going to talk about for several weeks is Treylon Burks. Okay, who's second in receiving on Arkansas? Tyson Morris, 337 receiving yards, right? There's a lot of players. If you're the only dude on a team that has to be accounted for, and you're playing in the SEC against the best defenses in college, and then you go out and you produce to a really high degree, yeah, that's extremely impressive. That's not quite the same as being the only dude on a team of future accountants and mechanics and car salesmen out over at Eastern Washington. If you're doing that in the Southeastern Conference, that's a feat. And the reality is most wide receivers that we get don't have other NFL players on their team. And certainly, if we're not going to make the target competition argument for someone like a Burks, I don't think that there's a reason to make that argument for someone like a Wandale Robinson, who has really similar production. And ultimately, to me, it ultimately just comes down to the draft capital. And if he ends up getting a high draft capital that some of those other solid prospects got, not like a Dwayne Eskridge, who did it at 24 years old, or Andy Isabella, who did it at UMass in a senior year. I think that in the context of what the regular indicators of our good prospects, Wandale hits them all.
I do. Hang on. I do want to jump in, not to rebut what he just said, more to like say something I missed earlier. I don't necessarily care about these statistics as an indicator of who he is as a player, and more about how the NFL views these statistics. I think that's a valuable way to look at that. Anyway, I didn't mean to rebut anything or jump back in. I just wanted to say something I meant to say earlier.
I think that's an interesting point too, and I want to be, this is like a preface because it affects like every wide receiver that we'll talk about. Like,
yeah.
So when I bring up a lot of these statistics, like, and I just like don't think that the NFL values these statistics. And in fact, I think if the NFL did value these statistics, then they would be very pointless, because like the whole idea is that the NFL applies whatever process the NFL does to tell us how good these wide receivers are, and then like us as like analytically focused prospecting people have come up with a set of statistics that tell us, like, from the sample of people the NFL says are good by drafting on the first 2 days, these are the things that tell us like who's likely to be good for fantasy, right? So to me, like, if the NFL was just going by the same stats that we were, then this would have no edge. Like, we would just be swimming in the exact same water. So I certainly don't think that those stats are like why he'll get drafted high. And in fact, like I really don't have any opinion in terms of who's going to get drafted when, beyond just like what the mock draft data tells us. And I certainly, like, my case for Wandel is not that he'll get drafted high. I really don't know. I just think if it does happen, like, he's going to be skyrocketing up my board, at least, because he has all the indicators of guys who produce well in the NFL if they're drafted high. And we'll see if he's drafted high.
Yeah, I just think he's one of those guys that history is super against his side and needs things to absolutely break right away. But that's why he's at 20, right? If everything breaks his way, right, 20 to 17 should be about where he goes, I think, because I think he is going to end up being a little bit of...
What's against him? I don't understand what's against him. Like, I just, like, if he's drafted in round 3, I don't see what's against him.
I don't think a player that size can be uber successful in the NFL. Outside of, I don't know, Tyreek Hill, who's still not that size. I think Tyreek Hill's neck is the same width as Wandel's thighs. I don't believe in it, but that's just how I look at it. I don't want a guy the size of Wandel or Tutu Atwell on my teams. And I know people go, Tom, you've written 2 articles and won't shut the fuck up about Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown put on the weight and was an explosive athlete. So I know the argument, size and athletics, and Dave was in the chat going, oh no, not those. Unfortunately, those things do kind of matter when you get into the big show. So we're going to see how it goes. Look, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back with number 19 on our list. We spent a while. That'll probably be the biggest one of all of the things. I think that's where we had the most differing opinions. So we come back. We're going to have number 19 up on the board. Enjoy another retro clip from the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast all the way back in early April of 2021. We've come a long way, fellas.
To get in before we go. Whoa. And I got to make sure everything is streaming everywhere else.
Billy, monumental day for you. Do you want to tell the entire world in this entire 2020 year was figure out how fast a 40 time he could run, and then eat as much protein as possible to pack onto his 5'8" frame so that he could come in at 201 pounds.
All right, I don't know why that thing's deciding to not work as well. So we're going to fire that back up in a second. I don't know.
Right before my announcement.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck was going on there. But look, as you could just see from the brief, weird little clip thing that just happened, we've come a long way with how everything works here, and I'm super proud of that. Number 19, guys, Rashaad White, Arizona State.
Yeah.
He's a little bit older, right? I think he's 23, 23.2,
yeah.
According to the player profiler. Look, came from Mount San Antonio College in 2019. We had 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, 25 receptions. Then, obviously, COVID, played 4 games, 42 attempts, 420 rushing yards, so 10 a clip. 6, look at me doing math, 6 touchdowns, 8 receptions, 151 yards.
Quick.
Target share is not an issue. And then at age 22, he played in 11 games, 182 attempts, 1,006 yards, 16 total touchdowns. This is important to me. 43 receptions for 456 yards for a 16% target share. to me, that's really incredible. I don't have a lot of strong takes about the Arizona State product. I like him as a player, so I'm going to start this time with Jacob. How do you feel about our boy here, and where did you have him ranked?
God, I love Rashaad White. The two guys that I like care the most about in this class are the two that we're starting with in terms of like, man, I really hope they get good draft capital. Like Rashaad White, this is the only guy in our entire top 20, by the way, that's currently mocked outside the first 2 days. And I think the big reason for that is there's like, at this point, especially after what Isaiah Spiller's been doing at all of his workouts, like, is there more than 2 running backs that we're 100% sure go in the first 2 days of the draft? Like, I think that we know that there's going to be 3 or 4 other running backs drafted in the second or third round. We're just not quite sure who those are beyond Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. And a guy who's currently mocked at pick 110, so in the first half of the fourth round, is Rashaad White. And I'm really hoping that he can get into the third round territory. I just love everything about this profile. Basically, what I'm looking for at running back, when I'm trying to make bets on which running backs I want to make, is we know already. And by the way, like if as you see this flash, there's just a whole clusterfuck of running backs that I have Rashaad White paired with, and you'll be like, what do all these running backs have in common? Because some of them are like really, really good, and then some of them are total trash. And basically, what I looked for is running backs with a half decent or good receiving profile that were overage, so came into the draft at 22 years of older or more, were 4-year players in college, and then kind of had like a similar range of size and athleticism, at least within some level. So try to get some decent range of outcomes comps on Rashaad White. And what I was looking for is like, if this person finds their way to walk into opportunity, right? Especially with guys that we're talking about drafted in the mid rounds, like what are the chances that they can really make that opportunity work in a way that works for fantasy football? And to me, that's like, does this guy have the size that he can actually eat up carries on the ground and take goal line carries? Does this guy have the ability to contribute in the receiving game? Does this guy have the sufficient athleticism that they can actually make big plays and convert touches into fantasy production? And there's just not that many guys in this class that check all those boxes. Once we get past Breece Hall, really, it's like we have Kenneth Walker. Can he catch the ball? Isaiah Spiller, does he have the athleticism? Does he have the juice? Samir White struggles with pass catching. And then on the other side, we have guys like James Cook, Tyler Beatty, Tyler Goodson, Kyron Williams, where they have questions about their size. How many carries is an NFL team going to load them up with? And I just keep coming back to White because he's the guy at 6 feet, 210, runs in the low 4.4s, has monster college receiving production, and I'm like, man, this guy can actually contribute in all phases. The only thing I'll note with White, I don't think that he's like quite as good of a receiving prospect as it looks like. He's not a guy, when I've watched him, that's getting like a ton of the route tree. He's not an Aaron Jones. He's not an Alvin Kamara. I think he benefited a little bit from his team's willingness to check it down. That being said, if you get that high of a target share, at least we know he's a serviceable receiver. He's not a guy who's going to have to get subbed off on third downs. And so to me, that checks enough boxes that I'm happy with it, even if he's not necessarily like a dynamic receiving option. But he's just a guy who I think can do everything well, and that's the kind of guy that I want to be targeting.
I think guys like Leonard Fournette have proven that you don't need to be able to run a full route tree to be successful in the passing game. You just need to literally be out there. Like Samaje Perine being the superior receiving back in Cincinnati year in and year out when he's there. So obviously White's probably better than Perine. I know Mixon's not, but Billy, what do you have here on Rashaad White? How do you feel about him? Where did you have him?
Yeah, I'm actually the highest of anyone on our crew on Rashaad White, which surprised me. I think that might be because of consensus and Jakob wanting to take wide receivers and yada, yada, yada. But I like Rashaad White a lot. As Jakob mentioned, he's one of the few guys in this class that feel like they check a lot of the boxes that we want them to check. He really has this level of maturity as a player and as a pass catcher where he looks like he can succeed in just about every phase. He works well going through the tackles. He works well catching the ball. He's a really good back watch on film. Like a lot of the other guys on here, they may not get as much love as like film players, but Rashaad White's just fun. He's fun to go turn on like a little bit of film. He's good at breaking tackles, which is going to be one of my bigger complaints about some of the other RBs we're talking about. But he's legitimately like one of the few players in this class.
That.
Yeah, that was a nice angle route.
Yeah,
like he doesn't get the ball here, but that ball was incomplete, by the way. He doesn't get the ball here, but he can obviously make this route, and that's the money route for me when it comes to right here, open. Yeah, that's 30 yards if they just give him the ball, but instead the quarterback overthrows the receiver in the seam by like 30 yards. Carry on, Billy.
All right, so I think Rashaad White has all the makings of being a decent PPR running back. Like, I think he could slot into a role similar to a guy like Michael Carter has looked at this last year. Good passing down work. Hopefully he doesn't get pigeonholed like Michael Carter kind of has as like a receiving down guy and lose some of those extra carries. But all in all, I think he's one of the few guys in this class that can fulfill all those roles. And because of that, I think that makes him more valuable than some of these other guys. Like a lot of the wide receivers you can take, I wholeheartedly acknowledge they're probably better NFL prospects. They can do things that some of the other wide receivers down the line can't. I just think in terms of what is rare in this draft, Rashaad White is one of the more rare prospects that we're going to be looking at. And because of that, I put him a little bit higher.
Yeah, he was somebody that I wanted to get higher. I felt like the receivers, I think I'm more willing to take a risk on. But I know Cute Hurts over there on Twitch asked if his age is concerned. Not really. I mean, because you're not going to have running backs on your dynasty roster really for more than a couple years on average. I think is kind of the vibe I've gotten over my years. So by the time you get rid of him anyway, he's already going to be 26, right? Maybe 27 at best. He's probably only going to get a 3-year rookie contract, right? Second and third day DC, whatever. So no, I'm not really concerned about his age. And if you look at Najee Harris, who, is huge, but not a great receiver, but can do it. I mean, White's not that far off from him in my opinion, as what he can do with the ball / being able to catch the ball. So I'm not really worried about his age, and I'm not worried about his catching ability. Jacob, you look like you have another opinion.
Yeah, I wanted to address the age comment because I think that's like an interesting methodological discussion. So, I mean, I would prefer that he wasn't 23 for sure. But I don't mind it that much. I should be clear. I care about age a lot at wide receiver. Specifically, I care about it for like a different reason. Like, I don't really care if a wide receiver is 23 or if a wide receiver is 21 from the context of like how long they'll be on my dynasty team. I care about it from the context of how impressive was like how they looked as a player versus their competition. Like and we've seen this, the data bears it out at wide receiver, that if you're not breaking out until you're 21, 22 years old, like that probably shows something that you're not able to actually dominate against competition that's the same age as you, the same maturity as you. And usually those players don't work out. And that's why I care about it. Running back, yeah, it is a shorter shelf life. So I'd certainly care more if he was younger, but there's just not as clear of a relation between age and actual ability. I think the fact that he tested so well at the combine alleviates some of my concerns, where it's like, okay, is this guy just like more refined, more experienced, more crafty than a bunch of like 19-year-olds that he's playing against? He tested with like mad juice at the combine, so that alleviates some of my concerns. And then the other thing, Cuter said like he thought that was a big concern with Najee, and yeah, it wasn't as much a concern to me in the sense that like I think Najee's bad. It was more like maybe like partially that in the sense that it was a risk factor, and partially like you're just investing way more in Najee Harris than you'd be investing in Rashaad White. To me, like I just don't want it. If I'm investing like an early first-round rookie pick, I don't want to have that guy on my roster for 2 years before I feel like I have to trade them. Like if Rashaad White, we're talking about what, 19, that'd be the 207. If Rashaad White gives you one RB1 season and then like decides to retire from football, like that's a success for a mid-second round pick, right? So that's why the age doesn't concern me as much. It's kind of funny. I feel like I'm combining two of my favorite prospects in the last 2 years, where it's like I get Elijah Mitchell from last year, who was this old running back who was super athletic that I really liked. And then we get Brandon Ayuk, who's this JUCO transfer to Arizona State. And I feel myself like I'm really just back on the wagon here. So we'll see. I think it's definitely fun. And I should state to Billy's point about like where I was at on White. I think I had him at 18 in my final rankings. He is my RB4. I will be clear. This is solely based on draft capital. Like, just because I expect to go round 4. If Rashaad White is drafted on the second day of the draft, I'm going to be like aggressively high on Rashaad White, like to the point that he'll be like bordering on my top 12 and possibly flirting for RB2 status for me. I'm really high on White. It's just that he doesn't seem to have the expected draft capital, which is like the NFL telling me something that maybe he's just like Charles Sims. I'll shout out to David Wilsley, who's made that out as like a downside comp.
He currently sits just above Kenneth Gainwell and just below Darrell Henderson on the old keep trade cut. So if you've already done if you've already done drafts, that's real cheap, and you should be able to go and get him. James said no invite, Tom, because I knew you were already busy. Yeah, I know. I was up till 11 o'clock getting all this stuff ready. Look, I'm gonna try this clip one more freaking time, and hopefully it works. When we come back, we got number 18. Some people already have this player in the top 12 of rookie drafts. Some people have already touted him as with the guys like, I don't know, Calvin Johnson and Andre Johnson and absolute monsters. I've seen it, and I think we need to address that. So we're going to try these retro clips one more time. So enjoy that, and when we come back, we're going to have a new pick here. All right.
To do in this entire 2020 year was figure out how fast a 40 time he could run, and then eat as much protein as possible to pack onto his 5'8" frame so that he could come in. It's kind of lethargic. He takes like the big flat foot step back.
These bad boys are not working today. And
That's so sad. That was one of my best bits. Like it proved to be like, I mean, I still call him this to slander him, but obviously he had a good rookie season. But that was one of my best bits. Comparing Mac Jones to a trebuchet.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why that's not working. I'm going to post those on the Bird app. Very sorry for that. Instead, what we're going to do is I have a clip here from Josh Larkey's show from last week instead. So enjoy that. You're going to be able to go and check that out.
So I think it just kind of goes back to this universal concept that people fear the unknown. You see it across every industry. You see it in politics. You see it in people's friendships. Just there's in economics. There's no way to avoid it. People are afraid of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And when you dive in and you understand the numbers more,
I have no idea what is happening with StreamYard right now, but for some reason the clips just are not working today. So sorry about that, everybody. But look,
it's all right. We're going long anyway.
We are. We're gonna have to. But like,
save those 30 seconds.
As it is, like I said, a player that people have unreal comps for already. I think because. I think
digging back into the Trey Lance tape, boy.
Christian Watson is a guy that people are already so incredibly high. His quarterback last year, number 2 here, is terrible. He is legitimately terrible. This is a play I didn't like that. Obviously, I believe he got really flagged in that one. Oh, it was like almost all of these passes are just absolutely terrible. One thing amazing about Watson that I really like. This is a good ball. Yeah, absolutely great catch there for a touchdown thrown by Trey Lance. Christian Watson blocks, and that's really important on running plays. If he goes to a team that has a Trey Lance, a Lamar Jackson, a Kyler Murray, which is my favorite landing spot for Watson, is Arizona. That is my favorite landing spot. That would be amazing.
I thought you wanted him to stop being underthrown.
Yeah, fair point.
You're right. These clips from this quarterback of his, like the non-Trey Lance clips, are really rough.
They're hard to watch, but he does stuff like this, right? Drop. That was a drop. He was wide open on that deep ball, and he actually dropped that ball, and no one touched him. So Christian Watson is a player that people love right now. Obviously, the super athletic type that people really go head over heels. But I am so worried that Christian Watson is more Keelan Cole than he is Andre Johnson. So, Jacob, I want to start with you. When you look at Christian Watson and everything that he provides as a 6'4", 208, soon-to-be 23-year-old whose production just doesn't seem to match his hype considering where he played. How do you feel about him, and what's your honest to God take on Christian Watson?
Well, first of all, if this was like 2 years ago, I would have been like, well, I'm going to jam Christian Watson in every single draft, because I would have just been like, oh, like this small school guy with like a lot of production this last year and he's like ridiculously athletic. I would have just been absolutely jamming him. At this point in time, having discovered the beauty of prospecting through data and analytics, I would say like I'm pretty cool on Watson. I'll be clear. Christian Watson was not in my top 20, which is pretty crazy, I guess, considering the fact that like we're probably already pretty underweight to even have him at 18. Among like the non-Power 5 guys, he might get drafted first. He is not all that close to my favorite. Like I prefer Shakir as the prospect over him. I mean, the draft capital won't agree, but like I think Romeo Dobbs is actually a better prospect than him. Here's my issue with Watson. So Watson is a fifth-year player. He scored his first collegiate touchdown in third year. Okay, normally we want people breaking out in second year. We want players by third year to be declaring for the NFL draft. He scored his first touchdown that year. He played at FCS. Like his production profile, if he played at Alabama and he had the exact same production profile, I would be like, well, his production profile is pretty uninspiring. And he was like a fifth-year senior, and he didn't break out till year 3. And he didn't really have like a true breakout till year 5. But he's super athletic, and he played at Alabama, so I can't hold it against him. Like, no, he played at North Dakota freaking State. And it's just really hard for me to fathom like this guy going potentially in round 1 I've seen, which is pretty wild to me. Like, yeah, especially take into account his athleticism. And I understand like that's a positive attribute. That's why he's going to go so highly in the draft. But to me, this just feels like, okay, he's a guy who's obviously an incredible athlete. But if you're telling me there's a guy who couldn't really start to put up serious production until the age of 21, 22 years old, or I guess 20 and 22, because they didn't play when he was 21, 20 and 22 years old as this phenomenal athlete playing against a bunch of guys who have 0 NFL careers, like 0 in the FCS. It's like, I'm not so sure that he's not just winning as a raw athlete, as a 22-year-old against 19-year-old and 20-year-old non-NFL talent. I'm just not convinced at all that this guy is actually like a real polished NFL player. So I agree. I think he has to go somewhere where very little is asked of him early on, where he can be put in a position, like Arizona is a great spot where Tom mentioned, where there's a guy in DeAndre Hopkins who's obviously going to command all the tough coverage. He needs to be worked into positions where he gets to have his athleticism thrive. My issue is it's like, I just don't like the idea of drafting a raw player who's one of the oldest wide receivers in the class. I would rather investing in a raw player. I'd rather have like a 21-year-old raw player who has more time to mold that clay. So I'm struggling with Watson. I think he's an exciting player. The ceiling is super, super, super high if it just took him a while to figure it out. But it's really hard for me in any case to judge production in such a weaker conference. And it's hard for me to judge it when the production's just not even really that impressive.
So there are two things before we go to Billy here that I just want to mention about Christian Watson. One, I did post early on that I would be willing to spend my 110 on him right now, because I feel like the community is going to be higher on him than not. So take him and trade him if you're willing to take that bet. Also, shout out Riri, who you can find also on Twitch. She's coming to us from Twitch. Usually smacking people up on the war zone over there on Twitch, but she's in here in the chat with us today. At 2 players that he reminds me of, I mentioned one already, being Keelan Cole, and the other with how raw he is, and I know he's not this raw, but Moritz Bullringer was drafted in the 6th round by the Vikings to initially play wide receiver. He's now a tight end because he's now 255 plus pounds. I actually don't even know where he's playing, but he's another guy that was size, speed, hype. Obviously, coming from like Germany, playing in their league, it's way different than just an FCS school. But the tantalizing size, speed players are often the most probably most overrated guys, but they don't have a complete profile. So Keelan Cole is why he's like number 1 for me for a comp. I'm more.
I have a comp too that I forgot to give.
Go for it.
I have a comp. So he reminds me like almost identically of Zay Jones, who was in the
Oh, yeah.
2016 class, and he went round 2 as well. Like, and Watson, I think, is going to go round 2. And so he had the draft capital. Zay Jones, 4.45 40, 85th percentile burst score, 92nd percentile agility score, 6'2", 201. Goes at the 5th pick of the second round. So I think really similar. And really similar guy where he had really nice production in his last year of college. He played at East Carolina. So he was playing in super, super poor competition. Had the athleticism, had the size, didn't have the production till late. Tons of hype around Zay Jones at the time. And I think this is just one of those circumstances where had Zay Jones come out and this happened in 2020, everybody would be doing the same thing that they're doing with like a Wandel Robinson right now, where it's like, oh no, it's Rondale Moore 2.0. Like I think had Zay Jones come out last year, everybody would be like, we just did this last year with Zay Jones. Don't make the same mistake. But since it was 5 years ago, everybody's forgotten. And so I think like we have seen these kind of profiles come up every now and again. And to me, it's like it's a very close comp, in my opinion, to Zay.
This miss is inexcusable to me. That is inexcusable to me. Was the throw bad? Absolutely, the throw was bad. Should he have caught this ball? For the people listening, this ball is thrown up like 30, 40 yards down the field.
Bro's got to sit down.
It is right through his hands, and he drops it.
Sit down.
It's like the throw was bad, but the play was brutal. Billy, Christian Watson.
Okay. To talk both in like well and against the FCS deal. One thing to note is I don't know if y'all realize NDSU is like the Alabama of FCS.
Better.
It's fucking absurd. They've won 9 national championships since 2011.
Insane.
Like, it's absurd. And I only know this because that championship's played in my hometown every year. So I'd always see like a bunch of NDSU people coming through when I was going through high school.
Nice.
But so one thing to note is that he did play in what should be an actual college system. He probably should be like their school probably is of the caliber of an actual college system.
Oh, yeah. They play Power 5 schools every year and they beat them, which is pretty fun.
The problem is the teams they play are not like good schools. So at NDSU, the first thing we need to take away for Christian Watson, to speak for him, when I see a player who is so much better than everyone else on their team, there's one thing I always want to look for, and it's big plays, and Christian Watson has them in spades. Like, you can go look through his game log on ESPN.com. Dude has like 60-yard receptions every game. Like, it's absurd. But I think a lot of what's feeding this Christian Watson train is there were a few people that were very smart ahead of this curve that was saying Christian Watson. I remember Brett Coleman mocked Christian Watson to the Vikings at number 12 well before the combine. That was getting made fun of on fantasy Twitter, which I like Brett Coleman, but well-deserved. And now he tests well. And all of a sudden, a lot of people were like,
Maybe there was something.
He got the
to
Senior Bowl bump.
So this guy screams to me. I'll give him a Power 5 comp. I'll give him a good player. He screams to me Denzel Mims. Like
a good college player. Good college player.
Big athletic Senior Bowl standout. But he just like similar to what I said for Wandel Robinson, a lot has to go right for him to be the outlier in this situation. Like, I think he has the legitimate circumstance to be a really good player. And I think there's a legitimate chance that one team really likes him and opts to take him very early on, whether that's the Falcons at the top of the second round or one of the teams that are starting an arms race in the back of the first, not the Packers. But all that comes down to say, like, Christian Watson is an absolute wild card in this draft. And that's what terrifies me about him. I think there's a lot of him that says he never touches the field. He's a practice squad player. He's getting burned in practice. Like, all that's scary. But there's also the legitimate thing that he just figured it out late and got really good and just dominated this conference. So all of this has come down to say Christian Watson is going to be, I think, a day 2, day 1 pick. I don't know as though I'm going to draft him with a lot of the guys on that, but I think Christian Watson deserves to be sitting in that third tier of players, because if he did what he did and tested how he tested and came out of some bullshit school in a Power 5 conference, let's say he did this at Kansas, like the worst football school, but still a Power 5 conference, we'd be talking about him in the first round with all the confidence.
Now I'm trying to remember like the last good NFL player that came out of Kansas.
Like, here's my thing with
Khalil
Watson
Herbert.
too. If he gets that
County
super high
transferred
cap,
away.
I don't. Maybe you guys see it differently, but I don't see a scenario where Christian Watson goes high in the real NFL draft and he doesn't immediately skyrocket up rookie drafts, like skyrocket into the top.
Like
I think if Christian Watson gets day 1 capital, he's going 1-5. No.
I don't think
if he gets day 1, and let's say, I know we're kind of landing spots don't matter type people.
I think
Watson
even if he goes day 1 to the
round,
Chiefs, I don't think he's going at 1-5.
That's what I was gonna say. Christian
Jakob,
Watson to the Chiefs, and so let's see if
it's
if the
Akeem
Chiefs,
Talib is the answer, by the way, Billy.
Let's
Gale Sayers.
let's
there you go.
let's say, oh yeah, the Kansas Comet, right? So let's say the Chiefs don't trade for DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett or anyone else,
Right.
and
They just draft DK Metcalf.
and the only receiver they draft is Christian Watson, and it's in the back of the first round. They have no one else but MVS and Juju Smith-Schuster. You don't think that Christian Watson's landing spot's too good to pass up, plus athleticism?
I think his ADP
pushes him
will be
way
like 1.8.
above guys Isaiah Spiller at 1.5. I think he gets there.
Okay, maybe ahead of Isaiah Spiller. I think he'd be like 1.8. I just don't. I think that there is like I just don't think there's any world in which Watson is going ahead of Hall, Walker, Willis, London, Burks, Wilson, and I think like it's very unlikely he's ahead of Williams.
I'm hearing a lot of Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the scenario you're discussing.
I don't know. I mean, I guess like that's like such a not situation. I think right now, I think it's likely he goes in the early second. Like I think we're looking at those 4 wide receivers I mentioned, plus Walker, plus Hall, plus Willis, plus like whatever other quarterbacks go in the first round, probably Pickett, and step in that late first. Then we're looking at like Olave. Like I think Watson's going to be in that mix with like Dotson and Pickens and Sky Moore and those guys, and certainly whichever one gets the best landing spot. If it's Christian Watson who gets that good first round capital in the landing spot, like I could see him getting to the top of that tier. I could see him being in the 110, 111 range, but like 1.5, I just can't imagine like maybe in certain drafts, like maybe in a few home leagues, I could see it on occasion, but on average, I just can't see a majority of dynasty managers going into the rookie drafts be like Garrett Wilson, Christian Watson, and like clicking the Christian Watson button.
Okay, so I just want to play ball now because we're having the conversation. Garrett Wilson goes to Atlanta at 8 and gets Marcus Mariota. You don't think that Christian Watson with Mahomes is going to like push a narrative?
Imagine. But I mean, oh my god,
now,
like this is the stuff I'm rooting for, right? Like that's the stuff I'm rooting for hard.
Yeah, because you want the good players to slide down and stuff, right? Like that's the classic thing. But
yeah, I don't think it would happen. But I mean, I'd love it. I think in some home leagues, yeah. I think in some home leagues for sure.
I would draft Christian Watson so early in my Madden 2022 franchise draft.
Oh yeah, because he's gonna be unreal. I think
fucking sick and mad.
I think one player that I think people aren't realizing is that Brian Edwards was also the size, speed, like guy, right? And look how he turned out in the NFL. And I think it's a very real possibility that people need to keep in mind for Christian Watson. He's going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be a ton of articles written about him. But I think he's in this draft, probably outside of Wandel Robinson, the most iffy 50-50 player to me. So guys, let's go to the number.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing is we don't have to worry about capital, right? Like he's going to get drafted.
He's going to get
round 2 at the worst.
Yeah, he's going to get it. And I think, guys, we've decided we're doing the first round this year. We're not doing the second round. We want to do the first round this year for the live draft show. I think we worked it out. Do we want to do both? We can talk about that, but
we're going to talk about it later. All I know is I'm picking Billy's drinks because of A-Rod versus Mike Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out.
He'll be
We gotta
drinking like
remind.
a fucking raw egg or something.
We got to remind everyone about that stuff. Look, we are going to play a quick clip that is going to work. I swear to God, it better work. And when we come back, we're going to go with number 17. Sit tight.
Hit it with that Miyagi healing.
Yeah, had to. Look, one thing I want to remind everybody is sometimes, you're having a rough day, right? And it's not going so great. So you figure, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym. And you're sitting there and you're working out as hard as you can. You're just trying to get as good of a pump on as you can. And you're like, oh, man, I've only got one thing left. Cardio. I don't want to do cardio. But you see, the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast provides you a little something when you want to do cardio. If you go and you log on to Underdog Fantasy, whether on the app or the website, and you deposit $100 for the first time ever, and you use promo code Full Tilt, well, Underdog is going to match your deposit to $100. So you get free $100 to go and spend on best ball drafts. And when I'm on the treadmill or I'm on the bike and I'm looking for something to do to keep myself focused and going, because from here up, I don't look like that big a dude. I'm a big guy. Running and walking is not my friend, but best ball drafts are my friend, because it helps me stay focused when I'm doing something that I don't really want to do, when I need to take a break from studying, or I need to take a break from losing in all my fantasy leagues, or on a treadmill. Underdog Sports provides you a quick, easy way to get online to the big board drafts, the super flex drafts, the rookie and sophomore drafts, anything that you want to do with your Underdog best ball drafts, you can do on their app, on the website. Use promo code Full Tilt. Get on the treadmill, go for a walk. Do not hurt yourself. Play it safely. Pay attention, but play Underdog. It's great for us. It is great for you. We can help one another win some money. It's going to be a great time. And you might even end up battling it out with Jacob, myself, Billy, Maddie. We're still working on Tom Lee in Australia. Underdog, you got to get your shit together. And of course, with March Madness, Pick'em has never been more fun. There are bonuses that Underdog provide to you for certain players, certain teams. So you're going to want to get on there, play some Pick'em, join some best ball, and join the online sensation that is Underdog Fantasy. Shout out for the thick guys. That's right. I also realized, I just want to mention, I am the smallest person on this freaking podcast. Lucas, or the Cute Hurts, is like 6'2", 230 pounds or something. Billy is a giant. I think you said you're like, what, 6? I think you said you're like 6'2".
I'm 6'5".
Jesus,
his handle is literally Big Billy FF.
What are you, 6'5", 240?
You don't need to know.
Big. Jacob's like 6'2", like 185.
I'm 6'5", 180.
Are you actually? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Tom Lee is
I'm
like
probably 190
6'4".
now. I've been eating a lot of pizza lately.
You're not on the treadmill playing Underdog. Tom Lee is like 6'5", 300 pounds and an absolute fucking unit. And I'm pretty sure me and Maddie are the most comparable, but I'm pretty sure he is taller than I am. This is bullshit. And I need to hire some more shorter people, because this is getting outrageous.
You got Wandel.
Yeah, I am the Wandel of this crew.
Here I am, standing up for the vertically challenged.
Well, at least I don't have picket hands. Look,
he on the hill can look down easier.
it's instead of lonely at the top, it's lonely at the bottom. Guys, number 17 for us is Sam Howell. The beauty about this show for me is that I don't really watch a ton of film until it's time to look at the rookies, to cut up these videos. So I'm seeing Sam Howell a lot for the first time. I haven't been a C2C guy yet. I am getting into my first one thanks to the show with Alfred Fernandez of C2C.com. I will be entering my first, so I will have to watch college football. But I didn't see a lot of good stuff from Sam Howell when I watched these games. And shout out to
which year did you watch, out of curiosity? Primarily?
I believe this is last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, the most recent year was primarily what you were watching?
Yeah,
Because that is
again,
the thing with Howell. Like he
Yeah,
was. It's a
surprisingly.
tale of 2 years with that man.
I think this is some 2020 and then some of last year. It is a combo. Caddy's Cut-Ups is where I got these clips in the All-22 show. Shout out to Caddy's Cut-Ups. Check his Patreon out. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's fantastic. We're giving a lot of shout outs today. And
it looks like
that.
a lot of, it looks like like in these clips, especially, like it looks like a lot of 2021 film, like just based on the backfield, like Ty Chandler's in the backfield, not Carter and Williams. So
right. And I want to stress, like, none of us are scouts. So when it comes to quarterback, which is the hardest position to scout, Sam Howell is combine and everything. I know when we were talking in the Slack, Tom Lee mentioned Sam Howell, his combine looks great and everyone's talking about him. But to me, he seems kind of clueless. So he's the lowest of the potential highly drafted quarterbacks. But like just watching him in the pocket, he kind of looks clueless. He's kind of got scatter feet. He is fairly athletic, but I don't think he's athletic enough to get away with some of this stuff in the NFL. His passes are tipped a lot. He gets strip sacked way more often than I want him to. I think there was a couple games he's back to back where it's just strip sack. He's throws quite a few awful.
My dude eats sacks like the Roe Henry bars. Like he gets sacked a lot.
He's got a little bit of robo sack in him for sure. I think when he goes into that next level. So he's obviously the lowest on this list. I think I was the lowest on him from our group. I can't totally remember off the top of my head, but guys, Sam Howell.
You were actually the highest.
Oh, was I?
Yeah, I was by far the lowest. Okay. We would not be talking about Sam Howell on the show if it were just my rankings.
Okay, well, fair enough. Apparently, I'm a fucking liar. I was the highest, but here's one. That one's pretty rough in the sack there. Got gang beaten on that one. Here's another one, clueless, strip sack. Just not phenomenal. It's okay in the lower mid. Here's not bad as tight end bailed him out. But guys, Sam Howell, Billy, I want to start with you. How do you feel about him, and what do you think his chances of actually being a successful NFL quarterback for fantasy are?
Yeah, when I talk about quarterbacks, a lot that what interests me is obviously how the NFL views them. But whenever the combine comes around, one of the terms that always catches my eye is the phrase NFL ready. And there were two quarterbacks that was kind of shined on as one of their few like pros, and Sam Howell was one of them. They're like, well, Sam Howell, doesn't have the legs of Willis, arm strength, it's decent, but probably not enough to compete with some of the best. But he is pro ready. Like he is ready to come in and be that guy.
Oh, I was.
And as Jacob was mentioning, Sam Howell is a tale of 3 seasons. He came in, he looked really good his first 2 years. If he was able to come out last year, we're probably talking about him in the same range as some of the better players in some of the better quarterbacks. He's probably above Mac Jones last year if he would have just came out. I remember early mocks going into this year had him number 1 overall, and he kind of lost that. But one of the big things to talk about with Howell is the downside he showed this year in how he was able to produce in his final year at UNC. And a lot of that comes down to, or is typically attributed to, loss of production or receiving production from, he had Daz Newsome, De'Ami Brown. I don't know why I gave Daz Newsome top billing on this list before. Michael Carter and Javonte Williams, all legitimate NFL talent. Daz Newsome kind of, but for the most part, all of them legitimate NFL talent. I believe 4 of them were drafted in the first, or 3 of those 4 were drafted in the first 4 rounds. Like legitimate NFL talent. So the question is, where did all that production go? So if we take the receiving production of just his top 4 target or top 2 wide receivers, top 2 running backs, Sam Howell lost almost no production in his most recent season. Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, Daz Newsome, De'Ami Brown combined for roughly 2,300 yards his first 2 years. And his most recent year, which I don't remember the other 3, but Josh Downs, who's a really good wide receiver.
Yeah.
Combined,
he's going to be not on the first show when we do this next year. He will be on one of the latter shows.
Legitimately probably a top 5 wide receiver prospect next year, if not top 3. Yeah. they all combined for 2,200 yards. So very similar production. So a lot of the question comes down to what happened to Sam Howell, because he lost a little bit more than 15% of his total yards. He lost a lot of the touchdowns. Like, he just isn't producing in the same vein. And I think a lot of it comes down to while we're adding on this phenomenal player in Josh Downs, we're losing some of the spread in their offense. And because of that, teams are able to focus on individual players a lot more. And Sam Howell just doesn't have as much of a capability to spread that ball around as much as he wants. And because of that, I think it's terrifying. The prospects of Sam Howell going early in the first round, early in the second round, because teams view him as pro ready, and going to a team that has 1, maybe 2 targets. Like, if Sam Howell were to, in some crazy circumstance, because I think they fit this bill really well and looking for a quarterback and 1 really good target, Sam Howell goes to the Lions. And Amon-Ra St. Brown gets a huge target share. All that comes down to say he just doesn't seem like the player that can make an offense. So because of that, I kept Sam Howell lower on my rankings. I had him higher than Jakob and Lucas, who were the lowest on him. But a lot of that is because he's a quarterback, and he's a quarterback who's going to play some legitimate games at the next level, and probably is going to be a first-round pick, maybe second-round pick.
See, that's why he's low. I just
I'll tell you something. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I see him get mocked to the Saints a lot early on, which is fine. But all this is to say, I don't see Sam Howell being good for fantasy. Like, if he is a starter his entire rookie contract, I legitimately think his ceiling is QB 20. Like, he's just going to be in that range where I don't see anything good from him. So,
Jacob, one thing I noticed about Howell is his first 2 years, he had 35 rushing yards in 2019. He had 146 rushing yards in 12 games in 2020. And then last year, he goes, fuck it. He rushes for 828 yards, but he throws 2 more interceptions.
And he a million sacks.
A ton of sacks. Yeah. And I think part of that is just him panicking and pulling it down. It's not like his 840 whatever yards I just said are because he's uber athletic like Ritter or Malik Willis. So
yeah, I would put Howell in the category of tactical scrambler, in the sense like he's athletic enough. Like, he's like, we're not talking about Carson Strong in the series, but like, if you ever watch Carson Strong, like I've said that not only does Carson Strong have a cannon, but he actually is one, because he's like screwed into the ground and he can only like turn around like a medieval weapon. Howell obviously can move. You don't have 800 yards rushing in the college season without being able to move around, and he's certainly an athletic quarterback. My issue is, I'm a little torn on Howell. Thing I don't like, Kevin Cole from PFF did this really nice study of looking at some trends that we can gather with quarterbacks, because, like we've said, it is hard to evaluate quarterbacks. But one of the clear trends that he saw in recent years is that even among quarterbacks at all other ranges of their profiles in terms of the passes that they actually threw, one key trend is that quarterbacks who've generally been successful in the NFL gain a lot of expected points added on scrambles and lose very few on sacks, essentially meaning that they're athletic enough to be really productive scrambling, and they don't get sacked that often, or at least they don't get sacked in a way that's really detrimental, like strip sacks. And Sam Howell is like at the extreme of both ends. He's a very good scrambler, and he's like 0th percentile in terms of like his ability to avoid sacks and not lose points on sacks. Like, he just eats them for breakfast. And so what that tells me is, like, whenever I see a quarterback that has a really, really high scramble rate and a really high sack rate, that tells me that they're not getting through their progressions very well. Like, that tells me that they're looking to run. And again, like, I'm not a quarterback film expert, but to me, right, like, let's look at the tangential evidence. It's like, guy has really good weapons. Guy loses those weapons. Next year, guy has less good weapons and immediately either takes a sack or scrambles on a really high proportion of his plays. Like, that's not a guy who's going through progressions to me. That's a guy who, if he's not seeing it immediately, he's not throwing it anymore. And that's a big concern to me. And that shows me maybe this guy has pushed up by his weapons a little bit. Things I do like about Howell, just like by the numbers, like looking at his QBR, looking at his yards per attempt, looking at his expected points, like he looks better by a lot of our traditional quarterback metrics than, honestly, the two guys that are probably going to get drafted the highest, in Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett. You know, so to me, like, I look at Howell as kind of like the poor man's Matt Corral, who we'll talk about a little bit later, in that he has some of the similar positive indicators that Corral has, also just a few more negatives, and his draft capital projects to be a little bit worse. So I don't mind Howell. If the NFL does draft him in round 1, I will be way higher on Howell. I just think he has like very real risk of like falling like hard. I think he will be the 5th quarterback on the board just based on how he's mocked. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes in round 2. It wouldn't surprise me if he drops as far as round 4.
Okay.
And so the reason why Howell is so low on my board is because I think that he's drawing live to be drafted on round 3, round 4, and just never starting a football game in the National Football League. And that's why, like, I just think like it's just such a more binary outcome with quarterbacks. Like, if I draft, like, if I'm doing a draft right now, and this is the parameters we set, is like, if we're drafting right now, like, Howell won't be where he is for me right now, because if he's drafted a lot higher, he'll move way up. If he's drafted like lower, he'll just fall off my board. But like, if Rashaad White goes round 4, it's like, oh man, that sucks. But he still has a path, right? Like, if Sam Howell's drafted round 4, then he's just not even an asset, right? Like, he's just literally nothing because he'll never play. So that's just kind of why with quarterbacks, like, it's just higher risk and higher variance in terms of like, when are you drafted? And with the guys, like, when we get through this, like, I was kind of the low guy in my ranks on Howell and Ritter and Corral, just because with these guys that are kind of up in the air draft capital wise, I'm just erring on the side of caution until we actually know.
It is hilarious how close his like best 2 season statistics are to Mitch Trubisky. Like, fucking hilariously on.
Yeah.
Like, I have no analysis to that, like, none at all. I just think that's a really fun fact.
It's crazy to me that Sam Darnold when he was in USC was known as a turnover machine, and that's obviously translated, but he at least had intangibles that obviously NFL teams loved, right? He could read a defense, and he could throw with anticipate. Obviously none of that panned out, except for like 5 games this year where I was living my absolute best fucking life on this earth. Howell feels to me like second year Sam Darnold in the NFL already, with how he turns the ball over and just seems to have regressed in reads and throws and turnovers, but yet also just runs a lot, so people get excited. So I think he is the biggest QB trap, and apparently I am an absolute liar, and the only reason we're talking about him because I put him too high. But again, we're humans and we change our opinions on the fly, especially me. I'm allowed to. I put this shit together. So that's how it works. We're going to take a quick second. When we come back, we're going to do our last one and try to get out of here before an hour 35, hopefully. We're gonna try, but this is my favorite player on today's show, so I'll probably have more to say than not. So sit tight. When we come back, hopefully this clip plays correctly. And YouTube, I swear to God, if you cut off our feed, I'm gonna be really mad. All right, sit tight. All right, this is the big dog, right?
Ding, 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 ding. Ring the bell.
16.
Toronto Dave, I hope you're in the chat, buddy. We're about to say good things about David Bell.
He'll sense it. He'll sense it, and he'll come back
at him right now
for David Bell. Guys, not a lot to dislike for me with David Bell, and I know immediately people go to the athletic testing and blah blah blah. I don't care that much about that. For a guy with David Bell's size, 6'1", 212, didn't shrink. I think that he's the size that we were hoping Rashad Bateman was last year, right? But obviously Bateman shrunk as the process went on. But 6'1", 212 is a great size. His target share at Purdue, 25%, 29.9%, and then 23.26%. Touchdowns of 7, 8, and 6. 93 receptions last year, 1,200 yards, And one thing that I noticed when I was watching these and putting these clips together, he was very much, very clearly the team's weapon. He was the read. They created plays for him. He runs this inside slant route exactly the way you want it to be ran. Like in the red zone, he fights.
Hey, Dave's here now.
That's what's up.
Ask and you shall receive.
David Bell runs the like perfect Robert Woods, Keenan Allen, like you have on there. Tyler, he is very much a Tyler Boyd type player, but he can do things Tyler Boyd can't, in my opinion. The play that people are watching right now, where he comes into the middle of the field, breaks 3 tackles, and just takes off for extra yardage. He's harder to tackle, big body, can play inside and outside, can go up top and stay shallow if he needs to. I just love him as a prospect. I love him as a player. And I think that if he wasn't just slow, like he wasn't Keenan Allen slow, so it's like kind of a little bit blown out of he wasn't there
He
though.
was pretty close.
I think that he is PPR friendly, and I think he can play inside and outside. I love him as a prospect. That's why he's so high on our list. People might think 16 is not very high, but that's what 204. That's pretty freaking high. That's right with Rashad Bateman territory last year. So I love David Bell. He's my favorite player on today's show. Billy?
I want y'all to hear what Tom just said about David Bell. Acknowledge the care that he just put into talking about him. Remember what just happened with the previous player. Then remember that Tom ranked Sam Howell above David Bell in these rankings.
Look,
I don't think that matters. I acknowledge things change.
We make mistakes when I said at the opening of this show, you know what? I'm going to address it. I said in the opening of this show that we wanted to make.
So anyway, I was talking about David.
Look, Billy's going to take a timeout real quick. No. We obviously want to make changes after we make our initial ranks, because more data and more research goes into it as we get ready for this show. So screw you, Billy. But
all right.
I'll let you have your moment with David Bell before I kick you out again.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, I hinted that I had a new number 2 wide receiver in this class, and I obviously didn't reveal it on the show because at the time we were running the promotion, I wasn't sure how my consensus was going to shake out. And at that time, the promotion included wide receivers. So I didn't want to leak it. That wide receiver at the time was David Bell, because I fell in love with his tape. I fell in love with his production, what he looks like as a route runner. And then his combine happened. Now, I'm not one to care about combine, but my biggest caveat when I said that David Bell was my wide receiver 2 was that I didn't want to watch him run poorly or test poorly. That was my biggest thing.
I believe I said buckle up.
Yeah. Oh, wholeheartedly. Look, I knew that it was a rough game. So David Bell fell. I'll admit it. I overcorrected. I should be 100% the highest player here on David Bell. If we had updated these rankings, I think I would be the highest person on David Bell. I think David Bell deserves to move into that upper echelon, or like that second tier of wide receivers. Like when we start looking at Pickens, when we start looking at some of the other guys in this class who aren't in that like guaranteed, we know they're going first round guys. I think David Bell should be there. His production is insane at Purdue. I mean, he outproduced Wandel Moore in terms of like his years there. Mm-hmm. He has the frame of a player who actually works in that like in the NFL sense. Like everything breaks well for David Bell. The only thing I did wrong was overcorrect on his 40 time. And I'm using this as a teachable moment before I go back and say, currently right now, if I was drafting, I think I would take David Bell over, let me do the math real quick, 3 of the wide receivers that we are yet to talk about.
Okay.
Easy.
At what capital? So when are you expecting him to get drafted?
I think David Bell goes late second. Or
that'd be nice.
or sorry, I misspoke. Mid-second.
I think he's going. I think he's going before mid 2. I think he's going early 2.
He's going in round 4.
Like I think there's so
way
much
round
love.
4.
I think there's so much love for these upper tier wide receivers. The problem is, Jacob, you've been saying this a lot on Twitter. Is 7 wide receivers are probably going in the first round. A lot of teams are going to make this conscious decision to sit there because there's a lot of guys in these back end of the draft who tested really well, but probably aren't going to get that top round draft capital. I think a lot of teams are going to be sitting there going, David Bell deserves to get drafted at this point. And I think that now I used this argument on Kenny Gainwell last year. And I stand by my thought process on that because I think it was a very fair point. And I think Kenny Gainwell is grading out fine. He probably isn't who I thought he was going to be. But besides the point, is I think there is a legitimate chance a team falls in love with David Bell. And if that happens, I think he's going to go in the late second, mid-second. Early second feels like a pipe dream. But teams could very well just be looking to grab him in that section because he's just that dude. And sure, he didn't test well, yada, yada, yada. I think David Bell deserves all the love in the world as a player. And I think he's going to climb my board after the draft. I think if I did these rankings again, he'd jump up. He'd definitely be in my talks for next week, obviously. He'd probably be close to in my talks for the week after. I don't know, but maybe I'll go take a look at that. Right now, I think David Bell deserves to I think he's legitimately probably one of the better prospects in this class. Jacob, go ahead.
Well, so I think that Billy just I don't know, kind of made the same argument that I would make for Wandel. I ranked Bell and Wandel back to back because I think that they are both guys that in every possible way that we look at analytically that matters, the things that I care about, which is mostly production. And, basically, how much did you produce and when did you produce it? And how did you produce compared to your teammates? By that metric, both Bell and Wandel Robinson have never once stepped onto a college football field and not been in a major conference, either the Big Ten or the SEC, and not outproduced their teammates and not produced above the threshold that we expect of a top 24 wide receiver. And for that reason, if an NFL team decides to draft them on round 2 or better, or even round 3 or better, I expect to be very good because that's just how they profile. Now, they're both missing one big element that NFL teams care about, that I care about to the extent NFL teams care about it, which for Wandel is size and for David Bell is athleticism. And I think it's interesting to me that Billy is so high on Bell, but not on Wandel, because I really do view them in the same category. My stance on Bell is the same as my stance on Wandel. If the NFL drafts the guy, I want him. I kind of love that Billy just went through the same emotional exercise that Devy players went through for the last 3 years, but in a week, where David Bell was the consensus wide receiver 1 in this class for 2 years. And then a bunch of mock drafts came out in the fall. They're actually the NFL doesn't like this guy. We're fuck. I was in a Devy draft in January last year, and I had my choice between Bell and Burks and Wilson, and I took Bell. David Bell going into this year was my wide receiver 1 in this class. If David Bell does get drafted round 2, if Billy is correct, and I really hope that you're correct, by the way, I hate being the guy who's been sounding the alarm on David Bell. If David Bell goes in the second round of the draft, he would be my wide receiver 5 in this class, at worst. I love David Bell. He's not going to get round 1 capital, Dave. That's not going to happen. He's not going to get round 2 capital. It's just not going to happen. His combine was super bad. People have been, the film community and draft Twitter has been way lower on Bell than fantasy Twitter has been for multiple years now. And I don't think that's smoke. I think it's possible he sneaks into the late second. I think it's very possible he goes in the third. And I think it's possible he falls to day 3. I hope that does not happen. I guess where I'm at is if I look at Bell, here's the chart, right? This is the perfect chart. These are guys that were drafted in round 2 or 3 with relative athletic scores under 5 in recent years with similar production to David Bell. They all worked out. Now, I can't guarantee that Bell's going to work out, But yeah, if he does get that capital, I expect him to be in that tier with the Keenan Allens and the Tyler Boyds and the Robert Woodses. As a guy, Jarvis Landry, who's going to be a really, really useful wide receiver. In terms of his film, in terms of like some stats, like actually about his play, I think he's really fascinating in that a lot of people have said like, oh, he just can't work in the NFL because he's this outside brawler wide receiver. I don't really think that's actually how he'll be used in the NFL or how he should be. Like, I don't think that he's a guy that's going to create a lot of separation. He's obviously not a very big plus athlete. But if you had to guess amongst all these short, shifty guys like Calvin Austin, Wandale Robinson, fast guys like Jamison Williams, so-called elite athletes like Treylon Burks, who actually had the highest like yak over expectation of all NCAA wide receivers in this entire draft class last year? It was freaking David Bell. It was freaking 4.65 David Bell because he's a baller, right? Like, he breaks tackles at a really, really high rate. He's able to generate yards after the catch. He has fantastic hands. He's just a smart wide receiver. Like, I think he actually profiles in the NFL as a slot wide receiver who has the ability to create after the catch. And as a slot wide receiver, like we've seen it with a Landry, like we've seen it with a Keenan Allen, as that larger slot possession wide receiver, you don't really need to be the super plus athlete. So where I'm at with Bell, I'm praying that on Friday, like I said with Wandel before, I'm praying that it's Friday and we hear David Bell, wide receiver Purdue, and I'll be super happy about that. And I'll draft him in all my drafts. The only reason I think I've been like lower on Bell to this point is I've just been very cautious that I think people are whistling past the graveyard a little bit with his draft capital. But I think now that people are realistic about it, I'm very happy to be a person who's potentially high on Bell again. And certainly if he gets the draft capital, I'm absolutely all in on David Bell. I'm just going to close my eyes, say he's Keenan Allen 3 times, and hope that it comes true.
So, Billy, you're muted.
Motherfucker. So real quick, while Jacob was going off, I agree wholeheartedly in the draft capital regime. I want to see the NFL be high on these guys. Like that means a lot to me. I real quick went through and did my math. If he went mid-second, early second, he would be jumping into my early second, late first round rankings for draft picks. Easy. And that
he'd be higher for me. That's the crazy thing. If he went in the early second round, he'd be like my 1.7.
Yeah, so
I just think that's so unlikely. That's all.
The only reason I have him landing there is because I really like George Pickens. So like that kind of knocks him down, but he'd be my wide receiver 5 at worst. But like I'm really excited about David Bell. I agree that it's a similar argument with Wandale. I just think people with David Bell's size and speed have a better hit rate in the NFL. That's really my only like big take on this, and why I have David Bell higher. But that's really it. Tom, I'll let you go back on to that unless Jacob wants to say anything else.
No, I love Bell. If he gets drafted high, I'll love him a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to mention another player who I obviously love a lot, who David Bell reminds me of, and I'm not outright comping him, but this is why I think that David Bell is one of the reasons why I think David Bell is likely one of the most pro-ready wide receivers in this class that can come in and immediately step on the field and look like a veteran. And as Boyd just popped, DC talks the loudest to me.
Tyler Boyd is listening.
And you're right.
We're talking.
Oh no, Jacob's about to get an enemy.
We're
everyone is too low
accurately low on Justin Ross.
For me, look, 6'1", 220 pounds. I just want to know if anyone could guess what I'm talking about. 6'1", 220 pounds,
okay.
30-inch arm. Was drafted at 222 in the NFL draft. Right, he is 84th percentile college dominator. He is a 65th percentile breakout.
Yeah,
age.
I got it.
He is a horrific athlete running a 4.72. His speed scores 88.7. Like, none of that screams amazing athlete. Yet he put up 13,779 yards. It is playoff MVP Anquan Bolden.
Yep.
When you put David Bell and Anquan Bolden side by side, Bell outdoes him in production. They are of equal size. Their athleticism is similar to me. And if Billy's right and say he goes mid to late second round, again, he's drafted the 22nd pick in the second round in the NFL draft in 2003. Like, to me, he's a pro-ready style, and even if he gets a couple of top 24 seasons in fantasy, I think David Bell is going to be pretty freaking lit. I don't know what Jacob is trying to pop up here.
You got to put this on the screen because this is really funny.
Oh God, is it gonna make fun of Anquan Bolden? Because
No, it's gonna make fun of you for being old. But I put this tweet up. You can barely see it. It says I put this after the combine. It's funny that you mentioned Bolt. I said it was the multi-generational David Bell coping family. Baby, he could be Amon-Ra St. Brown. Teen, he could be Cooper Kupp. Crazy uncle, he could be Jarvis Landry. Daddy, he could be Keenan Allen. And the grandfather says he could be Anquan Bolden. So there you go, Granddaddy.
Hipster cousin.
I delved deep into my comps list on that one.
I was gonna jump on like a similar comp. I like Anquan Bolden better because he was a better player than this guy. I was gonna pull out a Michael Crabtree, Texas Tech legend.
Crabtree was a good fantasy
receiver like Crabtree.
Crabtree was good for fantasy for a couple of seasons. And what I'm saying is like
Texas Tech legend.
What I'm
also
saying
a round one pick.
Yeah, you're right. A couple years ago,
that was a different world.
Exactly. I think a couple years ago, David Bell would have been an easy upper tier pick. The NFL has kind of evolved a little bit, but I don't see why you can't get a wide receiver 20 season from him as early as his second year. And to me, if you're drafting him in the second round of your rookie drafts, that is a successful draft pick. So I'm happy with that. Yeah. I'm happy stating that.
So
I love it. I just think like if I just think there's a non-zero chance that he's Tyler Johnson and the NFL drafts him in round 5 because Tyler Johnson would fit in all these conversations too.
Yeah, around 5, I agree with you, but there's no way he goes there. I don't think he makes it out of the second round personally, and if he does, early third to like Jacksonville, and I'm gonna be okay with it because the team is shitty and they need a player.
Need a third slot receiver.
Well, he can play outside, and that's why I think that.
I actually don't know if he can play outside the NFL. That's the question I have.
To make one more thing, that's kind of just something that David Bell holds over some of these other wide receivers that I think could be important for your average dynasty player is if David Bell hits in the NFL, David Bell has the skill set to be a wide receiver for 10 years. The way he succeeds is the way that keeps wide receivers relevant in the NFL. Like he doesn't have any athleticism.
Well, look at Tyler Boyd, right? Look at Tyler Boyd, who's
Boyd's
had
to be the NFL 33.
He's been a wide receiver 2 one time. Tyler Boyd, in points per game, much to Tom Lee's dismay. No matter how much Tom Lee's tried to sell us that Tyler Boyd was an elite asset, but I mean, whatever. You're getting that in the second round of your rookie drafts. You got to be pretty decently happy, guys.
I think Robert Woods is like realistic for Bell too, right?
Yeah,
like
sure.
Bell, like especially with the yak element, like Robert Woods is like this weird element where he's not that athletic, but he also gets carries because he's randomly good after the catch and like in space. And Bell kind of has that same mix that you don't often see for a guy of his athleticism, that he's not really a catch and fall down type of guy.
Like he's not Brian Quick, right? He's not big and athletic and can't do shit, but he's big and less athletic, but is a very good just player at the position. So I think he's a little bit slept on, but obviously he's up here in our ranks here at 16, right? I think it's at 16.
16.
Right. Yeah. So guys, I think that's going to do it. We're at 1 hour and 45. I love it.
We had 2 very passionate players on this episode.
Yeah, everything.
Well, I'm sure it'll only get longer as we go here.
Well, we're gonna try to keep it real, Dan. We went off the rails a little bit there, but that's okay. This is how it goes.
For stat quarters today.
Yeah, guys, what do we have ripping right now? Billy, I know you were talking about some stuff that you were up to before we went on air.
Yeah, I've been doing my mock drafts for each one of the football teams. I need to speed that up because there's like 30 days left and I have 31 teams. So those are about to start coming out rapid fire.
Love it.
I am enjoying PFF's mock draft tool. Its values on players is kind of really funny. I traded the Packers 122 for Jamar Chase today. So that was fun. But besides that, like, you can keep seeing that coming out on Twitter.
Jacob?
Yeah, you can find my work up on Player Profiler. I should have an article coming out shortly. I filed it, so we're pretty much we're pretty much all here except for the press publish. So that'll be the second edition in my Thinking About Thinking column. It's called A Soliloquy on Ranges of Outcomes, and I talk a little bit about like what ranges of outcomes are. I talk a lot about distribution curves, so it's probably the nerdiest article I've ever written in my life. And then I do talk about like how that actually affects fantasy football, the types of ranges that we actually see in fantasy football. So like when someone's saying this guy's a wide range of outcomes, or this guy's asymmetrical upside, or this guy's bimodal, like I want to talk about what that actually means and how that manifests and how it can be helpful. So it's kind of a fun piece. I hope people read that. And otherwise, I'll be on Dynasty Intervention pretty much every Wednesday, except not tomorrow because they're going earlier tomorrow. They're going on at 7 Eastern time, Chase and Shane. So I won't be able to make it, but I'll be back there the following week and almost every other week. Oh, and of course, you can always find me in the Bulletproof Discord, where I'll be working with Drew on our rookie guide. So if you like what you've heard on this show and you want to hear more of that, you can come in the Bulletproof Discord and I'll talk rookies like all the time.
Yeah, man, that's I've had to track him down in there because he's in there so much, chatting it up with the people.
It's the best place to find me. Like if people like, honestly, right? Like I'm on Twitter like a decent amount. I'm on Twitter, frankly, more than I should be. But I just like I'm working. I'm doing like my real work. I'm doing my fantasy work. If you like send me a DM, I'm honestly just probably never going to get to it unless I've interacted with you before and I follow you. If you tag me on Twitter, I might get to it. If you want to be 100% sure that I will get to any question that you have, like just join the Bulletproof Discord, and then I have a channel, and then you can ask me whatever you want on the channel, and I will always answer your requests in that channel. So make sure to do that. I also get great analysis from much other people.
Yeah, I've learned a lot since joining there. I have literally sent him full tilt stuff in his Discord channel, so
it's a better place to reach me.
Because he's even hard to reach in our own Slack channel because the man is just a machine. Of course, you can go to goingfor2.com. My first official article for them is out. 3 reasons why Trey Lance will break out in 2022. I should have added what if Jimmy Garoppolo stays, but I just assumed he wasn't gonna. So now I might have to, I don't know, put out a part 2. I don't know. I'm down bad, as Jacob would say.
I don't know. You're NGMI.
Yeah, but you can go and check that out. I have another article about to be released for them soon on why Amari Cooper is fantasy football's middle child and why you should be treated as such. Excited for that, and we have the fantasy walkabout on Saturday, as always. Myself and Tom Lee, and of course we have so many clips coming out from our previous show. Shout outs to all of our guests that were on over the last 2 weeks. Pat Dougherty, which feels like forever ago already, right? Steven Johnson, Troy King, Austin Gale of Pro Football Focus. Go and watch that show. That was one of the most incredible periods of time of my entire life. Go and watch that episode. We had Josh Larkey, Ben Gretsch, like just a truly unbelievable amount of guests. Tons of shows to go and catch up on. So we're going to be posting a bunch of that content. We have best ball draft content on the way. It's just, we are going absolutely bananas here at the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast, growing and growing faster than even me with all that time on my hands can really keep up with. So,
well, and you better grow because you're like really short in the context of this podcast.
I hate you so much. Remember that. Be kind to one another. Don't be a giant pile of human garbage. Check in on your loved ones. You never know when they're going to need it, especially when their favorite rookies start falling on draft boards because the NFL really doesn't love them. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, and that your best days, yeah, well, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.
Wandel Robinson, GMI.